Fox 5 and Hot 97 present Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers.
I'm so glad you're joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers on hip hop and the election. I'm your host, Lisa Evers. We saw famous hip hop artists and other celebrities on both sides turn out and speak out for their favorite candidate. They took cheers and a few jeers from their fans as they urged their millions of followers to vote a particular way. But did their influence really matter?
It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
Since its earliest days, hip hop has been shining the light on urban issues like poverty and neglect. In the early 1980s, it was Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five's The Message, says hip-hop journalist Rob Markman, host of Just My Thoughts on YouTube.
That was a very socio-political song, you know, and so that's always been at the root of hip-hop. Will that come back in vogue? We'll see.
Decades later, hip-hop is mainstream with multimillionaire artists courted by political candidates.
Overall, hip-hop showed up in a big way on both sides of this election.
Superstars Cardi B and Beyoncé, along with others including Fat Joe, endorsed Kamala Harris. But apparently their many millions of followers did not follow their lead, says Rider University professor Michael Rasmussen.
One of the things that we can't get away from is that Kamala Harris did not do better really across any demographic this time over 2020. So the question that you want to start to look for is, did they really have an impact?
The Trump campaign had support from Kanye West, DaBaby, and a post-election congratulations on Instagram from 50 Cent. New hip-hop artist Chef G spoke at a Trump rally in the Bronx.
Trump gonna shout the wins for all of us.
I think on Trump's side, the ones that he had, while there were far fewer, maybe they gave people permission to start thinking about supporting him because he improved his performance in the Black community, Latino community, and younger communities.
Artist, actor, and syndicated radio host Young Jock supported Kamala Harris, but Young Jock says he can tell from his listeners that President-elect Trump connected more with regular voters struggling to survive.
After a while, when you sit back, you start realizing that Trump touched on the hearts of I don't want to say just the lower class, middle class, lower middle class, and the lower class, because he started to do things that they could appreciate.
Let's take this to our panel and find out what they have to say. Joining us is Professor Micah Rasmussen. He's a political science professor at Rider University. Micah, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Lisa.
We really appreciate it. Also with us is hip-hop journalist Rob Markman. Rob, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for covering this topic, Lisa. It's important.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. Also joining us is Young Jock. He's a syndicated radio host, artist, and actor. Young Jock, thank you so much for being with us.
Hey, thank you for having me.
We really appreciate it. Rob, I want to start with you on this. In terms of the level of involvement of hip-hop personalities and artists, where would you gauge that from this past election?
I think this is the most that I've ever seen, right? And hip-hop has always been involved politically. We've seen it especially with the Obama election in 2008 really mobilized hip hop. I'm a kid and I remember Eazy-E in the White House. You know, it's not a foreign concept for hip hop to be involved, but hip hop really mobilized. And, you know, I was proud to see it, you know, especially on the Democratic side, because it wasn't just showing up to speak at the rallies, right? Like Fat Joe, I think gave an amazing speech at a rally to empower and encourage Latinos to vote in their own best interest as he saw it. But I also see Fat Joe, when it's not during an election cycle, fighting to lower the price of prescription drugs. You know, we saw Cardi B speaking at a Kamala rally, and she didn't give the best, most polished speech because she's Cardi B. She's very authentic. That's just what she does. You know what? But I also see Cardi B, when it's not election cycle, get on her live and talk about the price of groceries and inflation. You know, I also see Cardi B get on her live and talk about women's reproductive rights when it's not an election cycle. So it was great to see our biggest artists continue these conversations on a major level. And then we've seen it on the Trump side too, but not from artists that I regularly hear from politically. You know what I'm saying? When you think about, if I'm gonna be real, like Chef G showing up in the Bronx, you know, he has a case open that he's hoping, you know, we saw Kodak Black get pardoned because of Trump. You know, I thought that the Trump campaign were preying on some of our hip hop artists who are in really dire situations now and looking for a hand, and it was transactional in that way. But no matter what the motivation, we saw hip hop show up in a major way politically and try to help swing this vote one way or the other.
No, definitely. Young Jock, what about you? You were involved with the revolt speaking out. You supported Kamala Harris. What made you want to get involved?
I mean, I've done it in the past, in past elections as well. I've been in morning radio for a decade now, so I get tired of regurgitating the news that I hear or see. And it got to the point where I said, well, I have to go be involved. That's how I ended up in the DNC because I had to be present. I had to be present to be able to come back and say what I saw with my own eyes. I'd rather go to the source, get it raw, and deliver it with my own approach. You know what I mean? And that's kind of why I got more heavily involved.
All right. Professor Michael Rasmussen, in terms of the groups that turned out, is there any measurable impact of hip hop artists speaking out or in the community, in the culture?
Well, it's a little early to tell because some of the votes are still being counted, believe it or not. But what we can say is that I think we can say that there was a lot that was done on Harris's behalf that didn't pan out, that didn't show up in the vote, right? A lot of, specifically if you want to measure 2020 versus 2024, almost all the movement across any demographic was against her. It got redder. This was absolutely a big mobilization. I just can't find it so far in the results. Now, it's easy to say, I think, that, when everything moved against her, that it didn't work. The one thing we have to say is maybe it would have been worse if it wasn't for the mobilization and it wasn't for the endorsements, right? But we can say, I think, on the Trump side, and maybe those endorsements were transactional, maybe they were suspect, but they seem to have done something, and maybe it's not just, maybe it's something else. Maybe it's the economy. Maybe it's people being upset about inflation, no matter where they're from or what demographic they're from. But I think what we can say is that what he was trying to do there was he was trying to set up a permission structure to say, we know that the Black community, the Latino community wouldn't normally support Trump, but you have these people telling you that it's okay to support him. And maybe that message came through.
We have more for you right after this. Young Jock, in terms of the issues that concern you, because you're based out of Atlanta, right?
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the things that you've been hearing from people all throughout the last year or two?
Really, for real, after Trump, right? After Trump's last term, as he was going out, we were still in the confines of a pandemic,
right?
Global, not just nationwide, not statewide, not citywide, not countywide, globally. And I think when people keep going back to this whole concept of him giving all this money or whatever during this time, the stimulus, people felt like, hey, he came to our aid. You mentioned earlier in the earlier segment about, going and pardoning Kodak Black. After a while, when you sit back, you start realizing that Trump touched on the hearts of, I don't want to say just the lower class, middle class, lower middle class, and the lower class, because he started to do things that they could appreciate. You know what I'm saying? And people would feel like, oh my God, he did so much for us. So he stepped up when no one else would. During that 4 years, while this Biden term has been active, Kamala Harris being the vice president, we already know, like, come on, when is it that the vice president is really doing so much that we're talking about? You hardly hear from her, Mike, about the vice president. Here she is, she's actively a part of an administration right now where people are feeling like, yo, y'all got us in this bind. Y'all got us out here, this inflation is through the roof, right? Well, suddenly she has to step up on behalf of Biden having to step down. People appoint her as the new front runner for this administration, or I should say this party, the Democratic Party. She only has 100 or so days to start her campaign as the next president, number 47. Right. Well, right. Trump has had 4 years. Mm-hmm. So I hear a lot of gripes, man. A lot of people are just feeling the woes and the effects of this inflation, the economy right now. It's just some of the moves Trump made, although he may have seemed to be, a lot of people have said what they said, racist, fascist, bigot, all of these things, where it is very prevalent a lot of times when you hear his rhetoric, when you see his actions. But I think that what he did was he straddled the fence also while he was doing that and rounding up those people who are in support of that type of behavior and morality. I think on the other side of things, the morality approach was dealing with the Christians and people saying, hey, we don't support abortions. Hey, we don't support gay rights or gay marriage. Hey, we don't support transgenders playing sport. So you got a lot of people who have quietly sat back and suppressed their true feelings and emotions because of evolution. People say, hey, that's just how it is today. This is the world we live in.
Right.
And here's this guy who's lived almost, 8 decades, who's seen the transition from very troubling times to trying times to present times. And I think that you got people he tapped in with who said, you know what? I've been feeling like that for some decades. Now let's get it back to where it is. And I think that's just what people are dealing with.
Professor Micah, was it more of an issue that drove Trump's victory than anything else? Or what do you see?
Well, the two biggest issues for him in this race that he kept on coming home to over and over again were, the economy and the pain that people were feeling, and immigration, right? And those were the ones that he used like a blunt force trauma again and again. And he made sure you knew that if you knew nothing else. And of course, for Harris, it was all about abortion and protecting democracy. And those were the issues that she kept on coming back to. I hope people who endorsed this time and got involved this time, I hope they don't say, well, it didn't work, so I'm not going to do this again, because the communities do need to hear from people. And when you think that somebody is not giving you the whole truth, or they're just putting a spin on it, or they're trying to be all things to all people, that's when it's especially important to come to people who, your followers, the people who trust you, and say, look, there is more to the story here. You're getting just a piece of it.
Rob, I was out on the streets of the election week talking with a lot of people just like for hours. And in terms of the president-elect, there was like, okay, I don't agree with a lot of what he says, but at the end of the day, it's about my standard of living, the economy, paying my bills. What do you think in terms of the issues that you're seeing on your end?
Yeah, definitely the economy, definitely paying groceries. And Trump ran on that, and the tariff idea, I guess, sounded good to a lot of people, but we'll see what type of effect that actually has on the price of goods and inflation and this tax plan and what that actually does for the common American. But yeah, people vote with their pockets. Like I spend more for groceries now than I did 4 years ago. I'm going to vote on that. I also think women's rights is an issue in the community that I come from. I'm from Flatbush, Brooklyn. Again, New York, like big blue state, like don't tell me what to do with my body. And then, another thing that Trump has talked about this police immunity, which is a national police immunity. He doesn't think police should be prosecuted. And that directly affects the community because our community is the one that feels it the most when it comes to police brutality. And we've been fighting against that since before my lifetime. So there's a lot of things at stake, but ultimately people are like, hey, if I can pay my rent, if I can put food in the fridge, if I can get my kids back and forth from school every day, and feel some relief there, that's where they're gonna vote.
Young Jock, in terms of the sense of instability that people have, do you think that played a role in how people decided to vote?
I definitely believe it does. Again, you said something earlier that was very pivotal. Vice President Kamala Harris did not have a full term or the time that it would normally have as a presidential candidate and nominee to actually go out and campaign. President, people are feeling like, yo, he's not coherent to lead. He's got to step down, and then they got to nominate her. So it was a whole bunch of confusion with that. You spoke about the tariffs. The average person you have a conversation with about when you speak on tariffs, they have no idea, no clue what it means or how it works. You know what I'm saying? People don't understand that the way it's set up and how it affects the economy. They don't know.
Micah, is there any kind of measurement? Is there some behind closed doors with the political pundits and the political strategists? Is there any kind of a process where they go, well, 1 million followers may equal 100 votes?
Well, I wish we could say that, but I think if you look at the overwhelming number of celebrity endorsements that came to Kamala Harris's way this time, and it was really overwhelming for her, right? I mean, it was just, and she rolled out several for each rally that she did across the country. There was an inexhaustible supply of endorsements that she had all the way through. And like I said at the beginning, I just don't think there's a lot of evidence that it got her better performance than 2020. But I think what we can look at when we start to look at the endorsements is which ones maybe have more value than others. And the ones that are maybe just a tweet, right? That's probably the easiest thing you can do. Just a post on your social media, right? That's okay if that's what
Right.
you can do, right? But that's probably got the lowest value. And then the people who have a conversation with you, like Charlemagne the God had, boy, that was a real in-depth conversation. He talked about issues. He was back and forth. Joe Rogan did that with Trump, right? That's a different level of engagement. And that shows, I think, a little bit more meat on the bone to your fans, right? And then if you come out to a rally and you start rallying with these people, so I think there are different levels.
Just in response to that, when he says he's absolutely right, there's levels to these endorsements. I mean, Elon Musk with Trump. I mean, billionaire, richest guy in the world, endorsing Trump, bought Twitter, the biggest, if not the biggest, one of the biggest social media platforms they are. And Elon's whole campaign has been to democratize journalism, right? And anybody can buy a blue check. He believes anybody can be a journalist. The amount of disinformation, I've been on Twitter a long time. I love the platform. It has changed so much over the last year and a half. The amount of disinformation that I see, it is not objective at all what we see. And I'm a journalist who went to school. Like I graduated from Hunter College with a media studies major. I focused in journalism. I've been practicing this for 20 years.
Right.
And sometimes I see things on the timeline that I don't know if it's true or not, and I have to go back and research to see. So if I can't figure it out, then the average person, the average voter cannot figure it out, and people are being purposely deceived.
We had with us for most of the show, young Jock. He had to leave, but we have our guests, our panel, some of our panel remaining. Micah, what do you see moving ahead? Like, are there things a couple months from now we're going to be like, oh, wow, the election really changed this or really changed that?
Oh boy, well, the biggest one that has, I think, the possibility of just really being a dramatic thing that we should be expecting, that he promised, that he said he was doing, but I don't think anybody's going to be ready for, is the possibility of these mass deportations. I don't think, and this is something that affects specific communities. And I know, we heard that Latino community, people who came here legally, okay with it, fine with it if you're not here illegally, but I think when people start getting pulled out of their homes, pulled away from their families, it might be something different. We'll have to see how this plays out, but I think it has the potential to be very ugly. I think it has the potential to be really upsetting, and I don't see any chance that Trump isn't serious about it, or that Stephen Miller, one of his chief advisors, is serious about it. And so I think we're going to have, that's the thing that I'm watching closest. A lot of policies go back and forth, right? And, a lot of them affect our lives, but one of them that's really going to be out there, very jarring visually, is this one.
No,
Lisa,
absolutely.
just to add on to that, and I feel like a lot of these policies will become, because we'll do 4 years and another administration can come in and start reversing the things. But for me, the truly scary and terrifying thing is his effect on the Supreme Court, him putting more judges on the Supreme Court, and these policies then become irreversible. We already seen what they did with Roe v. Wade and overturned that. So how many more of the rights that we have fought to gain as a society, be it women's rights, be it rights for Black Americans, be it rights for whoever, LGBTQ, how much of that gets pulled back, and to a point where it's irreversible to gain those rights back because the Supreme Court is packed.
One final point, Professor Michael Rasmussen, one of the other things I kept hearing from people, and a lot of them, again, supporters of Kamala Harris, they were just like, I'm just glad it's over. Like the day after the election, they were just like, it was like, phew, we can breathe again. They were disappointed, but they're like, I'm glad it's over. What about that sense of tension that people have been feeling?
Well, I think that one thing that I have also heard, in addition to just putting it behind us, is also that there was a clear result, right? That the same person who won the Electoral College won the popular vote, and there's not really questions this time about who won. Now, if Trump had lost, of course there'd be questions, because that's what he does. He doesn't accept the loss. But I think there is a sense that the fact that there's not a question about the outcome of the race definitely is a relief to people. We're not going to have a January 6th, right? There's definitely that. But people should take a break. People should do some mental health. People should, check out when they need to check out. but we're in for 4 years where we're really going to have to watch what goes on, and you're going to have to be vigilant. You're going to have to pay attention because it's going to be a question of an agenda that they've laid out that's very aggressive, that's very different, that's very foreign to a lot of people, and you just have to watch every move.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers on hip hop and the election. You can watch the show again on our Fox 5 NY YouTube page and the Fox Local app. You can also browse our library of episodes there. Remember, use your mind, it's your best weapon. I'm Lisa Evers. Let's